Woohoo!
Oh, there we go.
All right, we are rolling. Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining our panel, Fandom Through the Generations, here at Forcefest. I am Richard Woloski, and I just want to thank everyone so much for enjoying Forcefest this weekend and supporting all of the panels, supporting Make-A-Wish, and want to remind you once again to make a pledge to Make-A-Wish. We're going to put the link in the chat right over there. And if you want to also go to Get Vocal, right up in the upper right, you'll see a blue diamond with a V in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so you can pitch in a couple of dollars or cents, whatever you want to do for Make-A-Wish through Get Vocal. And guess what? They're going to match 33% of all donations made through that Get Vocal V coin. Just go ahead and click that. Do what you can. Thank you very much. Leanne Nelson just pitched in 2,900 V coins.
That's amazing, Leanne. I think that's the equivalent of like almost $50.
Woo!
Oh my gosh.
Well, you are making kids' dreams come true.
Yeah, and I do have to say, over the course of this Forcefest, we have made over $2,100 for Make-A-Wish Greater LA, and we are so excited.
$2,150.
Yeah.
Now, without further ado, we are so happy to bring you this panel that will travel through fandom from 1977 through today.
Now, everyone, I am Sarah Woloski, and on this panel, we have some guests who have pushed the boundaries of Star Wars fandom in so many ways. We have Craig Miller, the director of fan relations for Lucasfilm and creator of the official Star Wars fan club from 1977 to 1980. Hey, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Hey, Sarah, Richard. Thanks for having me.
We're so excited that you're here.
And we also have Dan Madsen, founder of Star Wars Insider and the next iteration of the Star Wars fan club from 1987 through 2002. Hey, Dan.
Hey, guys. To be here. Sorry you can't see me.
That is okay. We are just glad you're here.
You know, by the end of this panel, the video will kick in. All right, and Mark Daniel, who is the warm-up stage host for many of the Star Wars Celebration, going back over the last 10 years from Celebration 5. He's going to join us in just a few minutes.
That's right.
But for now, let's travel back to what I like to call the vintage classic retro days of Star Wars, my era. I love this so much. So let's go over to Craig Miller, who was, I would say, the grandfather of Star Wars fandom.
Yeah, that makes me feel so young.
Well, grandfathers these days can be in their 30s.
Well, you know, I was a science fiction fan growing up, and throughout, and still to today. But that was sort of how I got involved, and so I was originally a consultant prior to the opening of Star Wars on how to market to science fiction and comics fandom. That was my original involvement.
Now, tell us the early days of Star Wars fandom. I love going through those early Star Wars fan clubs and reading the letters from fans. So can you tell us what your perception was of the fandom back in the early days?
Well, it was mixed. They were all ages. You know, most of like science fiction and comics fandom were late teenagers and adults. We were hearing with Star Wars, we were hearing from that group as well as little kids. And so we tried to do things that we never aimed anything at little kids. The fan club was always aimed at teenagers and above in terms of what I included in the newsletter and stuff like that. But it was always, we had a lot of the fan mail was from little kids, but there was also fan mail from college age adults all over the spectrum.
And you went to the conventions with Charlie Lippincott to promote Star Wars. Do you remember what the fandom was like in terms of the questions they would ask, their perception on Star Wars?
Well, you have to remember, or actually none of you are old enough to remember, but you have to understand that in the 70s, science fiction was not popular. Today, every other movie is science fiction or superhero. Back in the 70s, science fiction was thought of as stupid as that is the movies. They were made for little kids. They weren't anything respectable. And this was also the time where all the movies were that ended with, and then they all got run over by a truck. You know, things like Easy Rider and that kind of thing. They were all trying to be very profound and that sort of thing. So we were suddenly I'm much bigger.
You're talking.
Yeah. So, you know, so the reaction from fans based on the presentations we did at conventions was first it took something to get them to come into the room, and they all came in skeptical. For the most part, after the presentations, they left going, wow, this looks really good, if only they can pull it off. That was pretty much the response to our early presentation.
Do you recall what the most common question was for the fans during these early Star Wars presentations? Other than, could you guys pull this off?
Yeah, I mean, there were questions about how are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? There was a lot of fans who were, you know, these days we have a term in science fiction literature, hard science fiction, for the ones where they go into how they do everything. The joke is they want to be able to see the rivets in the spaceships. And so we'd get a lot of questions about, you know, that sort of thing. And we'd explain that it wasn't hard science fiction. This is science fantasy. It's adventure. It's fun. It will be science fiction, but it's not going to be that kind of science fiction. And mostly because they found we actually knew science fiction. Like when Gary Kurtz came with us for the presentation at the World Science Fiction Convention that year in Kansas City, and he would say, and he would in his answers bring up E. Doc Smith and other early writers of science fiction. The answer was like, okay, these people actually know the field. They're not coming in it as outsiders. So that was very helpful.
And then in 1980, you started doing presentations yourself for The Empire Strikes Back, and the Star Wars fan club had rolled into Bantha Treks. So Star Wars fandom was beginning to hit a very, very high, and people were more dedicated to Star Wars.
Right. Actually, we started the convention presentations in mid-'79, the San Diego Comic-Con and the World Science Fiction Convention, which was in Brighton, England that year. So we were doing them then. But yeah, I mean, Star Wars came out and suddenly there was Star Wars fandom.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, you know, the conversation went from arguing about how many times you've seen Star Wars as compared to how many times I've seen Star Wars to Craig, don't look back. Craig, run. You're
That's amazing.
Yeah. You know what? If he's comfortable, then we're all comfortable. All right. So then the conversation went to, was Darth Vader lying to Luke when he said that he was his father? So when you were doing these,
right, that was Empire, of course, but
yeah. So when you were doing these conventions, of course, the conversations were more Star Wars hardcore. So do you remember any of the questions that were asked or things that maybe got a little too close to the plot?
Well, you know, when we were doing the early presentations on Star Wars, we were telling a lot of people the plot, not all the way to the end, but you know, it wasn't a thing we had to keep secret because no one was thinking, oh, I can make money off of this. Oh, I'll spoil the movie for people, that kind of thing. So in selling the movie, we were telling them the story. By the time of Empire, we were much more withholding of information. We didn't want people to know too much about what was going on.
Right. Now, I'm going to ask Dan and Mark. Oh, they went dark. Hey, did you guys have your Bantha tracks? Want to throw it out there to you guys.
Ask again. Sorry.
This is Dan.
Did-
I had mine.
You have your
You had
Bantha
yours?
tracks all the way back to the Star Wars fan club newsletters? Oh, I think Dan went to go look for them.
He has a site.
I do. Guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you,
Can you hear
Dan.
me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, guys.
Yep.
Okay. Yep, I did. I still have all my Bantha tracks. I was one of the very first members of that original club, and it was fond memories getting Bantha tracks in the mail, and it's what inspired me to get started on doing a Star Trek fan club, because I thought, well, Star Trek ought to be doing something like Star Wars is doing, and so that I still have my Bantha tracks. I love those. I cherish them.
Well, thank you. Back then there was no internet. We weren't having the kind of immediate feedback you get today. So when I was writing all those issues of Bantha tracks the first few years, I was writing what I thought I would want to see if I was receiving them, but they were sort of going out into the void, and I had no idea. It's only in recent years when I've been at like Celebration or places like that, where fans come up to me and tell me how much getting Bantha track meant to them, and it's so good to hear, and I really appreciate them telling me.
What about you, Mark? Did you get the Bantha tracks?
I did not. I grew up in a different country, so it would be very hard for me to get those things. I will say, I am recently been seeing a lot of Bantha tracks things, but just listening to your story, Craig, I just want to say, first of all, it's an honor to be a part of this panel. But I think what speaks to me the most is, like, you talk about Bantha tracks and you talk about the sci-fi world, and you can tell this was a labor of love for you. So at the point when I came into Star Wars' fandom in 1997, you were already hard at work way before that. But everything has built on what people like you have done. So all I can say is thank you. And, to watch your labor of love become what it is now, you have to be very proud.
Proud and astonished.
Well, especially when you're hearing stories from Dan, who had started his Star Trek fan club being inspired by what you had done with the Star Wars fan club and Bantha tracks. Now, the Bantha tracks had folded its last issue in the winter of '87, and a few months later, it was picked up by Dan Madsen, who needed to get the word out there. There's more Star Wars films coming. How can we get the word out to the fans and keep them interested? So, Dan, by the fall of 1987, you had started the Lucasfilm Fan Club magazine. So, can you tell us about those early days of Star Wars fandom?
Yeah, absolutely. It was exciting to become into the whole Star Wars universe. As a result of my work on Star Trek, I had gotten a call from Howard Rothman, head of licensing at Lucasfilm, and they had said, we closed down the club. And I remember when the fan club closed down. I was like, I can't believe they're closing it down. I mean, there's still so much that can be discussed and talked about. So at any rate, yeah, when we decided to get the fan club back up and running again, at that point it was decided that it should be called the Lucasfilm Fan Club, because there was no idea exactly when George would get back to doing Star Wars films. And we had Willow and Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade coming down the pike. And those were two projects that Lucasfilm really wanted to promote. And I was excited about those. So we started the fan club. We restarted the fan club with the Lucasfilm Fan Club, and I always made sure that we had something in the fan club magazine that was Star Wars related because that's what most people were interested in. It was hard there for a while. I mean, from the point 87 to 97, there wasn't much about new really to really feature and cover. So we were covering film was doing things like Willow, Indiana Jones, the video games, the books, and things that were coming out around that time.
And late, I would say mid 90s, that's when we started really hearing about new Star Wars that was actually coming in the form of special editions, which we all knew would lead into new Star Wars films. So Dan, do you recall what the fan reaction was at this point as it was just reaching its second coming?
Yeah, it was very exciting. People were very excited. We launched the Lucasfilm fan club at the 1987 Star Wars convention. That's where we had a table, and everybody was out by the table and signing up to join the new fan club. And they seemed very excited. I mean, they were really pumped that the fan club was back. And I can still remember people saying, I don't know why they canceled it, to begin with. So we found a lot of excitement, and it was a fun time to be a Star Wars fan because everybody was wondering when George would get back to doing new Star Wars films.
And having run the Star Trek fan club before the Star Wars fan club, you've touched on two big Star franchises. So how much truth was there to a Star Wars versus Star Trek rivalry?
I mean, there were fans that always picked a favorite, but to be honest, properties, it was all in fun that most people kind of did the whole Star Wars versus Star Trek thing. Me personally, I love them both. There's not one I love more than the other because they're so different. They're not alike. So, that's not really something I ever noticed was a serious issue. It was just more kind of for fun, or somebody would do an article on Star Wars fans versus Star Trek fans. But, I found a lot of fans who love them both, just like me.
Yeah, raise your hand if you love both Star Wars and Star Trek.
Yeah. It was more of a novelty to join in on this rivalry of this fandom civil war than it was anything.
I will say Star Wars has better aliens.
Oh, throwing it down.
I'm throwing it down. I love them both, but I would say Star Wars has better aliens.
Star Wars.
I'm gonna go out there and say yes with Mark.
Say what, Dan?
Yeah, he agrees with Mark. I think the biggest rivalry was that both franchises had the word star in them.
I agree with Mark.
Yeah.
So Dan, being at the Insider, what was the Insider's viewpoint on fandom? What was George Lucas's viewpoint on fandom, and from the Lucasfilm staff?
Well, they wanted to reinvigorate the fan following, and it's that I think they recognized that there was still a great passion for Star Wars, and we felt that the same way. We felt like there was still a lot of people out there that wanted to revisit all of the original film. And so that's why, every issue of the Lucasfilm fan club, we always had a Star Wars interview. I think Anthony Daniels was our very first Star Wars interview in issue number 1. But in my interviews with George, every time I would interview him, I'd always ask him, well, when are you getting back to Star Wars? And George would always say, well, I plan on getting back to it at some point, and I would always think to myself, oh, please get back to it soon, because we wanted new Star Wars that we could cover in the fan club magazine. But I know that Lucasfilm realized that the fans were still out there, and I think that's why they licensed me to come back with a new fan club, was because they understood that the passion was still there, and they wanted to continue to provide them more material, and at the same time cover some of the other projects that George was involved with.
Yeah. And not only did you start up the new Star Wars fan club, you and Anthony Daniels had produced the second official Star Wars convention, first one being Celebration Zero. But then in 1999, you and Anthony Daniels had put on Celebration. How much of a thrill was that? And what were some of the fan reactions around this convention, aside from the weather?
Well, the weather was a massive element to the first Star Wars celebration. With that name, I should say. Yeah, it was exciting and daunting. Anthony had flown out to Denver, Colorado, which is where we had the very first celebration, and about 2 weeks prior. And we had been working the year before that, trying to get the whole thing off the ground. And Lucasfilm worked very close to Celebration 1.
Uh-oh.
I think we lost Dan.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Now we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, good. You can hear me now?
Yeah, we can only hear you.
So I mean, Lucasfilm wanted to focus on it. Go ahead.
Tony talks about Celebration 1, this Denver one, in his book and describes it in detail very appreciatively.
Yeah, I loved hearing those stories about that. And you know what? I didn't know that Anthony Daniels had co-produced that. I always thought it was you, Dan. It wasn't.
Hear me now?
Yes. All right. And
Yeah, there's just a delay.
There's a little bit of a delay there. So you know what? Until we can get the better connection here, let's hop on over there to Mr. Mark Daniel.
Yeah, and Dan, if you have a moment, if you could just refresh your browser, and then we'll come back to you, okay?
All right. So Mark, you started with Star Wars Fandom with Celebration 5 10 years ago. It was 10 years ago.
Believe it? Yeah.
No, I don't want to believe that at all. And you were the warm-up host, you and Elliot Hansen, and so you got a great grasp on the fandom. So how much involved were you with Star Wars Fandom at this point?
Well, I will say I was involved with Star Wars Fandom. I was lucky enough to be working at Disney's Hollywood Studios at the time before Star Wars Celebration came to Orlando. So I was part of the first ever Star Wars weekend. So all your viewers out there, if you're familiar with that, Star Wars weekends was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday at Disney's Hollywood Studios, and they would have celebrities and a lot of Star Wars characters you can meet, because on a regular day at Disney's Hollywood Studios, you could actually meet Chewbacca and an Ewok while you rode Star Tours.
Wow.
And that was it. So that was it. And let's just say I was really good friends with Chewbacca at the time. So
really?
Yeah, very good. We're real good friends. Like, I see from his eyes, even though they're brown. Mine are. And I was able to be part of the first Star Wars weekends ever in 1997. And we had it was a unique thing that we were doing. They had weekends before that, but never a Star Wars weekends. And that's when I really saw the fandom. You know, you could meet a few people that really love Star Tours and enjoy Star Tours. And I think Disney kind of made Star Wars available to everyone to experience it outside of the films. Even if you're a fan or not, Star Tours is just an attraction. So people do attractions. You don't necessarily have to love the movie it's based on to experience it, because you're at Disney and you're going to do all the attractions. So I got to see fans during that. But most importantly, I think my fandom connected during Star Wars weekends when I was first introduced in 97 to a group of fans that loved Star Wars and would dress as characters. And they were known, I did not know before that, they were known as the 501st. And that's when I saw, you know what, this is something, again, built on Craig and built on all the work Dan and Craig did. You have fans that were actually finally able to come together and make an official fan club where you could cosplay. And I know that we don't like calling that. I know they don't like calling it cosplay in the Star Wars world. It's more trooping. But I don't want to offend. But and so that's when my connection to the fandom started, and then into Celebration, being a part of Celebration, involved in what was happening at the main stage. And I think the unique thing about the first Celebration, which happened in Orlando, they knew about the fans, and I think they brought me and DJ Elliott in. We weren't needed, but I think it was the first time they wanted to really show appreciation to the fans that were waiting for the panels, that were waiting for things, because they noticed there was a lot of wait time for panels and events. So they said, hey, let's entertain the fans. And that became one of the best jobs I've ever had and hope to continue to keep doing.
Yeah, at this point, fandom had really progressed, where Craig and Dan would put out newsletters and have to wait a couple of months to see a reaction, or go to a convention and hear the reactions from the fans. There was a Celebration now every year, every couple of years, and you got in the faces of all these fans. You were either shooting T-shirts at them or telling them to recreate scenes from The Lion King by holding their baby up. So you became a face of fandom. So do you recall any stories from the fans afterwards who said, oh my goodness, the panel was great, but I loved just talking to you and feeling that energy?
Yeah, one big one was meeting you guys for the first time. I think I first met you and Sarah in Anaheim.
Yes.
Was I first met you two, and you really stood out to me, just your passion about Star Wars and just how cool it was. The big thing is people giving out the patches that they make. So that's a big thing. But you meet so many people throughout the years. But I think one time Ellie and I met a veteran, and this was in Anaheim, and we were doing an after party, and he came up to us and he gave us one of his challenge coins, but it was a military challenge coin. And he told us, he said, I'm a veteran and I was wounded and I only have one leg and I'm always in pain, but I'm not in pain today because I'm dancing. And Elliot was playing music, and he said, I'm around people like me, and we're all Star Wars fans. And that really stood out to me, for somebody to take the time to come talk to me and Elliot and tell us that we really meant something to him, and he wasn't thinking about his pain because he was having fun and he was dancing. It just meant so much. So that's one that pops out, the biggest. But the biggest things are the kids. When you see families loving Star Wars, and that's the biggest thing about the franchise. That's a little different than Star Trek. Even and Dan can definitely talk on this. I love Star Trek myself. Star Trek had an animated series, but I wouldn't say it was it wasn't like a cartoon for children. But I think really and truly Star Wars was able to capture a lot of generations, and it's just something you can share in. And that's what I think connects me the most, is when I see little kids and the dads and the moms just celebrating a franchise as one and coming together. I think that always puts a smile on my face, and I love to see the little kids dress up. So that's the big connection, is when I see families really enjoying it together and they're all dressed up. Kids, you might find kids on the dark side and the parents are on they're rebels.
Yeah, you really stuck out to us at the Anaheim convention too, because Sarah and I are watching you and Ellie, and you're working together as a team, and you're getting all the fans connected. It's like at a baseball game when everyone's doing the wave. You're getting everyone to cheer on different sides for different factions of the galaxy, and you really united the fans.
Yeah, and get them hyped up, and like the energy in the room is so important for these panels. And it
is so important for the panels. I can tell you one of the unique things I would notice is that Elliot and I get to be backstage, and a lot of fans don't know. And I know Craig and Danny have interviewed a lot of people. and that's a one-on-one interview. A lot of these fans, and not fans, sorry, a lot of the actors from Star Wars, they don't really interact with live audiences. You know, when you're on the set of Star Wars, you're just there. It's very pristine. There's not a lot of people. There's not a lot of feedback instantly. You get that from the director and the AD and the producers, but not 10,000 people at once. So I remember Ian McDermott, he did his first ever celebration in the United States. And he was sitting there and he was actually nervous. He was actually sitting backstage and he was nervous about going out on stage. And this was a panel for the Emperor. And it was one of the coolest things that he was nervous. I was nervous walking next to him because, you know, Ian McDermott, especially after the prequels, looks like Palpatine at all times. So it's, you know, so I would kind of be nervous talking to him and stuff. And we get to talk to the celebrities because we talk about introducing them and things like that. And I did a game with the audience because, you know, of course, everybody coming to the panel, they love Ian McDermott, they love the Emperor. So I had who could sound like the best Emperor. And I had a game where I made people say things the Emperor wouldn't usually say, like, you know,
Hakuna Matata.
Plastic, you know, random things. I had just pick out random things. You know, it was a lot of fun. But Ian McDermott was backstage, and he was, when I came off, the stage manager was telling me he was laughing, and it really relaxed him. And when he came out, he actually acknowledged it and said, hey, I hear a lot of people, and one guy was really good. And then he started doing it. And they said backstage, they saw him get comfortable. He said, okay, I'm ready to go, because he heard the reaction of the fans and he felt the love from backstage, which really helped him relax.
That was an amazing panel. I know we were in the room for that. And yeah, Ian was fabulous. And I remember he did a reading from the Shakespeare book. Remember that? And like blew us away.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, Sarah, by the way, it's Mr. McDermott.
Oh, well, we're on a first name basis.
And I'm out.
He'll be knighted soon, I'm sure. I'm sure we'll have to call him Sir soon.
And just like I asked Craig and Dan, as you were backstage with the stars and the creators, what was some of their reactions to the fans?
You know, they loved it. I can tell you a story about Dave Filoni, which a lot of the fans will already know. You know, like I said, I was part of Star Wars weekends, and the 501st would volunteer in the parks and they would march. You know, we had a parade. And excuse me, before I really know Dave Filoni, if he was at Star Wars weekends, he would actually stand backstage where they stepped down, and he would watch all the troopers, and he would watch all the costumes, and he would really admire them, and he would just sit there quietly. And I think a lot of people didn't know who the guy in the cowboy hat was. A few people did, but he would just watch. And then on a panel, and I literally saw him, and then one day he was on a panel for Clone Wars, and he was talking about, and a lot of fans will remember this, he talked about creating, I believe, Sabine.
All right, Sabine Wren from Rebels.
Yeah, and he was talking about he created the character with colors and armor that troopers could recreate. He said he kept that in mind for the 501st. And, you know, and I thought it was very unique that he said that. He said, I keep in mind when I'm designing my characters that somebody will try to make this costume. And it struck into me because I saw him watching troopers and I saw him admire costumes. So he was not telling a lie. He was being honest. And I was like, no, I saw him do it. He is telling the truth.
Yeah. And he even went so far as to release like the character key on StarWars.com for different characters from Rebels. So it has like the exact colors they need to use and things.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, we're talking about connecting to fandom, and what a way to connect to fandom. What a fun way that George was not able to do. But now, because of social media and how quickly, you know, to talk to Craig and Dan, when I mentioned that I was in a different country, so I didn't get Bantha Tracks or the Star Wars fan club. Now everything is universal, you know, because we have social media. So everybody from around the world can at the same time get the information or enjoy something together. And that's the big change, you know.
So here's a question you might have to dig back into your cranial archives to get.
It's foggy.
Yeah, no. What was the best thing you've ever heard any of the Star Wars creators or actors say about Star Wars fandom? And since, Mark, you're up right now on the presenter mode, go ahead and reach back. And do you remember a comment someone made or
You know, I think every time, well, I will tell you the energy of Mark Hamill. Every time Mark Hamill came out, the first thing he would do would be to thank the fans. And the last thing he would do would thank the fans, because he would always say, without you, we wouldn't be here. I think Carrie Fisher, as far as like things said, I don't remember. Again, it's so emotional. I just remember the energy and the emotion of it. You know, how much she loved the fans and would address the fans, you know, and do her lines from the films. I mean, she probably did it 1,000 times that day, but she would always repeat the lines everyone wants to hear. You know, they would really play to the fandom. And I think that was very important. And like Craig and Dan mentioned, there was a time when there was no new Star Wars. You know, we just loved these characters. There was no excitement about anything new coming down the pike. It was just that these characters mean something to us. And now we, beyond knowing the characters, we know the actors. I mean, people know Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher more than they know Harrison Ford, you know, and it's not a bad thing. It's just how it is, you know, and people really, beyond connecting with Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia, we all connected with the actors and they inspired us personally.
Yeah, very.
And I think that's a big
Yeah,
thing.
I mean,
those were the big things, you know. And again, the other thing I will say is the inspiration from George Lucas himself, when he would come out and say, you know, if you want to be a filmmaker, and his inspiration didn't come from what he did in Star Wars. I think his inspiration for me personally, and maybe some other fans, came from what he said when he was making Star Wars. That everyone, and Dan and Craig can speak to this, everyone told him no. Everyone told him this won't work. You know, like Craig was mentioning, sci-fi was a joke. You know, it wasn't as serious, you know. So he started in the middle. He said, well, I want to tell this story first, you know, and people told him no. And he just said, I did it a lot. I got a lot of no's and I did it. And I did it for the kids. And I think that's a big thing to find inspiration in when you believe in something.
Very much so. All right, Craig, the same question for you.
well, I'm not sure I remember any specific comment or something. Carrie, you know, not that she had a protected childhood, but she just was never exposed to fans and fandom. And so she was a little, in the early years, put off by all of it. Mark, on the other hand, was a fan. He went to conventions like Comic-Con in San Diego. He's a big comics fan. He used to go to those before Star Wars. And so he was familiar with fandom. He knew about fans. And so while no one expected the response to Star Wars that it had, he was well aware of fandom and fans. And he's right. Without the fans, Star Wars wouldn't be what it was. Harrison was a lot more put off by all of that. And I think probably still is. He's a much more serious guy. He has a sense of humor, but he's much more serious about everything.
After one of these conventions, do you recall anything that Mark Hamill may have said about, wow, these I used to be these fans and now I'm where I am, and I love hearing from them because I know what it's like. I don't mind waiting and I don't mind standing around and answering their questions. I don't mind signing autographs because a year early before Star Wars, or even a couple of months, he was at these conventions buying comic books.
He was, and he came with us to the World Science Fiction Convention in Kansas City in 1976 to promote Star Wars. And of course, no one knew who he was then. He was just this young guy hanging around our exhibit talking about the movie. And he was having a good time and telling fans what the movie was going to be like and being excited about it. You know, and so he was very, very easy with dealing with fans and talking to them. Sometimes they'd get a little overexcited after the movie came out, but no, he was good with it all.
Okay. Now, how about you, Dan? Dan, can you still hear us? So if you're there, I want to ask you about the same thing. About
You still hear me?
Oh, I can hear you fine now. Yeah. Yep. So
Can you guys? Okay, good. Okay,
yeah,
good. I mean, for me, for me, I think one of the most special moments was when we introduced Anthony Daniels on stage at Celebration One, and he came walking out with an umbrella because of, as everyone knows, we had one of the worst rainstorms in 100 years in Denver. One, and so that was one of my favorite memories from one of the actors dealing with Celebration One. But I think one of the things that is most important to me is after Celebration One happened, I got an extremely nice letter from George Lucas and Gordon Radley about how with the first celebration, and irregardless of the weather issues we had, and the fact that the convention was almost canceled due to the Columbine shootings that had happened 2 weeks prior in Denver. We still made it happen, and it was a challenge, but it certainly it's certainly the best memories I've ever had with my participation in Star Wars fandom.
and after all those torrential downpours in Colorado during that celebration, the fans, I've seen pictures, they're still waiting in line. They're still happy to be there and happy to be talking with each other and happy to have this community. This is like on the cusp of the early days of social media, so we didn't have access to it. Only if you had a computer and could work your way through all these chat rooms. But here they are. They didn't care about the rain. They didn't care about the potential thunder and lightning. They just wanted to talk with each other. And I've seen pictures of Anthony Daniels out there getting soaking wet and talking to the fans. How was Anthony Daniels afterwards, after celebration? He had calmed down after all this. How was his reaction to the fans?
He was exhausted, but he was so impressed with the good nature of the fans and how they stood out there in the rain and waited to get into the main tent where we had all of the celebration things going on. It was it really showed us the character of the Star Wars fans and how much they loved and adored, so that they were willing to put up with all of this in order to have that with Star Wars, and to get to see what might be coming down the line here and with the Star Wars prequels. I mean, that was an exciting time for fan because they had been waiting for so long to see new Star Wars, and Celebration One was the opportunity to kind of get to see what was coming from new Star Wars. And it was an extremely exciting time to be a fan, and it was amazing, the tenacity of the fans as they stood out in the rain and didn't complain and were excited, talking to one another. And Anthony went out in the rain with his umbrella and talked to everybody standing in line. He was such a trooper. I can't say enough nice things about Anthony.
Oh, that's so good to hear. And I know we have some comments in the chat here, like one from Victor, who was there and says, Dan, I remember seeing the Klingons walking into the food area and everyone stopped, looked at them, and continued eating their food.
See how accepting Star Wars fans are?
Yeah.
Should be.
But there's also a mixed
I remember that, actually. Go ahead, Craig.
Oh, you were saying something, Dan? Or Craig?
I was saying that there's a mixed bag with fans.
Remember the
different,
Go ahead, Craig.
I remember at all of the recent premieres, they Lucasfilm invites a lot of like the 501st and Rebels and that sort of those groups to come, and they'll be standing on the sidelines during the arrival of the actors, and then they get to see the movie at the premiere. I remember at the Last Jedi premiere, Kelly Marie Tran came out, and there was a young woman on the sidelines, part of the, I don't know which group she was with, but she was standing with all of the fans. And she was dressed as Rose. And she had never seen anyone cosplaying her before. And she came running over to the, when she spotted her, she came running over to the edge of the walkway, hugged the girl. She literally had tears in her eyes, and they took a lot of photos together and that sort of thing. But later, some of the, anti-sequel fans were just pounding on her. Part of the too many characters who weren't Luke and Leia, too many girl characters, too many people of color characters, that whole thing that came up on the sequel trilogy. And that really took a toll on her. She kind of shut off social media because of that.
Yeah.
Which is really too bad. Mark?
Yeah, no, I want to really touch on what Craig said. I want to touch on toxic fandom, and I also want to talk about, how fans at Celebration, the live fans that love Star Wars, they come and they redeem it. I want to talk about, and some great examples, like Craig talked about, was Kelly Marie Tran. She did have to shut down her social media, but I remember when she came out for the final film at this last Celebration, I saw her backstage, and I'm friends with Jonas, so Jonas was really cool. I'm friends with Jonas, who played is the new Chewbacca, and he introduced me to the cast, which was really cool because I don't know anybody else, but I do know Jonas. So, but I remember Kelly Marie Tran had a beautiful dress on, but she was really sitting off by herself, and I think she was very nervous about going out on set because of what she'd experienced. But when she walked out on stage, because everybody came out one at a time, the fans gave her a long-standing ovation. And I think that really helped, given everything she had been through, to get that feedback in a live arena with that many people appreciating you, was a good experience. Also, too, Ahmed Best went through a lot of stuff, and it was great to see the fans embrace him once again. And I do remember the anniversary when we had Harrison Ford at Celebration. He came out. Hayden Christensen was there, and he also had a lot of backlash and felt that people hated him. And I remember my ex-wife at the time was a stage manager for that panel, and he was very nervous backstage. He was telling me about it. And when he came out, he also got a standing ovation, and he came off stage crying. And he said he thought everyone hated him. Like, he literally said that. She said, I heard him say it. He thought everyone hated him.
The majority of fans are great.
Yeah.
It's just that loud minority.
It makes it hard. It's loud people, but I want to talk to the minorities that are in this chat room, people that feel that way. There is nothing like when you can watch Star Wars, because so many people love Star Wars. And when you are of Asian descent, of Black or African descent, or brown skin, and you see a character on the screen, just as much as you love Luke Skywalker, and just as much as you love Princess Leia, you look and you see an Asian person talking on that screen in Star Wars. It does something for you, again, for Star Wars, And when people get upset about that, they just don't understand that. You don't understand. You love Luke Skywalker, but for me to see Finn and see that character and see somebody like me reflected on screen, I'm not saying get rid of Luke Skywalker, but I love it even more now. I have a new character to connect with, and that's what we all want when we watch these movies. We want a connection. Who do you connect with? And when you see somebody that looks like you, it's so amazing. So, just sit back. And if you have an issue with that, just let people have it, because you have it too, And so that's just, it's very important to have that representation. Even if they have one line, it's okay.
Mm-hmm. the best thing about
aliens, there's tons of aliens.
Amen.
Yeah, I remember on Star Wars, I connected a lot more when it first came out with Luke Skywalker, and now I seem to connect more with Obi-Wan.
Right? It changes.
Yeah.
You know, during COVID, I put on a lot of weight, and I connect more with Jabba the Hutt. So I don't want to move. I just want to sit there and eat frogs.
Dan, were you gonna say something?
I said amen to Mark. I agree with everything he said. And I guess I would have to say that I was in love with Yoda because when I saw a little guy like me, that was one of the most powerful Jedi, I saw that it didn't matter how big I was, I could still be powerful. Yoda was an inspiration to me many years.
Oh, that's amazing.
You know, I had a friend of mine saying, her name is Jackie, and she's a stunt woman, and she said when she loves Star Wars, and when she saw Star Wars, she was a gymnast, and she said no other movies addressed a gymnast and somebody that could do that. She said when she saw Luke Skywalker training, it spoke to her that look at he's flipping, he's doing these things I do in gymnastics, and they're helping him be a Jedi. And she said from then on she was 100% hooked, and that was her connection to Star Wars that brought her into that universe. And and again, there's so many little things that can speak to so many different people. So again, I'll just say it one last time, I don't have a problem with different cultures being placed into Star Wars. The more connections you can have, the better it is. More people love it.
One of the actors
Absolutely.
I had a real strong connection with was James Earl Jones, because he had a stutter when he was young, and so did I. And I was always afraid to public speak. I was terrified. In school, I'll take the F. I don't want to read a passage from the science book. And I read that he had a stutter, and he just got over it, and he just kept working toward it and overcame it. I thought, well, if he can do it, then that's something I can do. And that was such a pivotal moment.
And he continued to have that problem. I don't hang out with James Earl Jones, but I used to see him a lot back in the 80s, and it was still an issue for him. And there would frequently be, when we were doing the looping on Empire, he would have to do multiple takes because sometimes he would still start with a stutter. And so he continually had to deal with it. I don't know how he's now, but even back then it was something that he still dealt with, but he worked hard to overcome it. And of course he's became one of our finest
with
actors.
the most distinguishable voice too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
However, I'm still
yeah.
waiting for the blonde girl in
The
Star
blonde
Wars.
princess. You'll always be my blonde princess. All right, we only have a couple of minutes here, but so let's ask this question here. What are some of your high points in fandom? Something that someone said or someone did. I know, Mark, you had said that you had spoken to that veteran who felt so good at Celebration. Is there another moment that really sticks out when you want to think about positive Star Wars fandom?
Something that sticks out, positive Star Wars fandom. I think I think something I shared with all the fans. I think there was a moment, and it was like, I think arguably, I think the biggest moment in Star Wars ever since No, I Am Your Father, and I didn't get to experience that in real time. I wish I did, but I already knew before I didn't know. Does that make sense? Like, I didn't get to really go, what? So it was the last film. And I remember I was backstage and they were all talking about the new characters. And I saw Ian McDiarmid walking backstage. And I was like, that's weird. They're talking about the final Star Wars film, and we didn't know the name yet, The Rise of Skywalker. We know now, but we didn't know what the name was yet. And I'm like, that's weird. Why is he walking backstage? That's weird. And I looked to see what the next panel was, and it didn't include Ian McDiarmid. Mr. Ian McDiarmid. Sorry, Richard. So I was like, that's weird. So I'm just kind of like watching again. And I'm watching what's coming up there because they're also showing the newest costumes and new characters, and I'm kind of watching the screen of the pictures that are coming before. And then I look, and the tech hands Ian McDermott a microphone, and I'm like, why does he have a microphone? What's he doing? What's happening here? And I remember they were wrapping up, say, okay, we're wrapping up right now. And I said, something's going on. And I ran to the side of the stage. I turned my phone on, and we all know what happened. They run that trailer. We see the title. And at the end, we hear the laugh of the Emperor. And you could feel it.
Yeah.
People went nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, it was insane. And to be part of that moment right there, like 4 inches from the stage, looking up and watching when the lights came on, there was Ian McDermott standing there, and he says in his Emperor voice, roll it again.
Yeah. Oh.
And he disappeared, and they ran that trailer again, and that laugh coming up. To be part of that live in that room, I can still feel it now. So that was, for me, the biggest moment of Star Wars, and a big surprise. There were surprises in Star Wars, but nothing was as big, because as far as I know, no one ever assumed.
Yeah, that was a very, very uniting moment for fans. It was ear deafening.
Yeah.
So we got a couple of seconds here. So Craig, what was one of your fandom high points?
Well, it was sort of a similar moment that Mark was describing. It was in '79, and I was doing the Empire Strikes Back presentation at the San Diego Comic-Con. Comic-Con was much smaller back then, like 6,000 people instead of 150,000 people it is today. But 5,000 of them came into or 4,500 to 5,000 came into the room I was doing the presentation in, much to the chagrin of all the dealers in the exhibit hall. And we ran, for the first time, we had a new trailer for Empire. And it was the first trailer. No one had seen it. It hadn't been in theaters yet. And we debuted it there. And we had to run it twice, because the first time it was just continuous shouting and cheering and yelling. And then we ran it the second time, and it was still very loud, but you could at least hear some of it. But it was just that kind of response to Empire, still a year before it came out, 2 years after Star Wars came out.
Awesome.
So that was pretty exciting.
All right, Dan, tell us about your fandom highlight from your point of view.
Well, my highlight would be at Celebration 1. And I would add, it's also at the last celebration in Chicago and that was realizing being on stage at Celebration 1 and looking out at the audience in that giant tent while the rain is pouring, and then and seeing the number of people that were at that one, and then being a celebration in Chicago. I was in the front row there with Warwick Davis's family and watching all about Celebration 1 and about all the celebrations. And as I turned around and looked to see the amount of people in that auditorium was mind-blowing. And to think it started at the very beginning with that convention in LA, Celebration 0, and then seeing where it's become is mind-numbing. Just it was really heartwarming to see what even just Star Wars celebrations had become, even beyond what the whole Star Wars franchise has become.
Yeah, very, very, very much. Love these fandom moments. All right, we've gone over our time by a couple of minutes. We have to wrap this up, but I want to thank everyone for being here. This has been a dream panel. This was the first panel I wanted to do for Forcefest, and I'm so glad that I got the trifecta of Star Wars fandom.
Yes.
If we had an extra box right over here.
Yeah, we have to give a shout out to Ashley Eckstein, who really deserves a place here on the Mount Rushmore of Star Wars fandom as well, since she pushed fandom in a whole new way especially for us females, when she started her clothing company, her universe, and of course by being the voice of Ahsoka Tano.
All right. So if you guys, Craig and Mark and Dan, if you want to put any kind of links in the chat to let people know where
social media
where they can buy Star Wars Memories, a book you guys have to read if you're a Star Wars fan, and go to LOL for Life. And visit Dan. He's got a ton of great stuff that he's been posting on his social media about the early celebration days. Please go ahead and do that. All right, so everyone, once again, this has been a dream of mine for this panel. I'm so happy you were here. Thank you so much for coming to Forcefest.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
and
you,
as we
Richard
say,
and Sarah.
Mark. Well, yeah, Mark just said to infinity and beyond. All right, everyone. May the Forcefest be with you.
That's great.
Nice.
All right, everyone.
All right, you guys. Actually, we have to leave because we have another panel starting. But if you guys want to give